upon a time, there's these chapters in the Bible that are basically just genealogies, and like he begot him, and he begot him, and she begot him, and blah blah blah. So there's a lot of chapters out in the Bible, and then it's like Abraham, and Abraham shows up, and God is like, that one, I want that one. And so he goes up, and Abraham's like chillaxing one night or whatever, and God's like, hey Abraham, what's going on? Abraham's like, who the hell are you? He's like, I'm God, what's up? He's like, oh, what's up? And God's like, well, you know what you're gonna do? I'm gonna make your dong so plentiful that you will have billions of children. Yeah, you see those stars? You see those stars? No, those stars. Yeah, those stars, your kids, those stars, man. And it's going to be awesome. And so Abraham's like, okay. But before, he was called Abram. But God decided that someone with such a huge dong could not be named Abram. He's like, you are Abraham. The extra syllable symbolizes the giantness of your dong. Abraham's like, no way. And then God was like, yes way. See you later. So God went up to heaven again, and Abraham was like, oh my gosh. And so he runs home, and he tells his wife, he's like, hey, guess what? We're going to have a lot of kids. And she's like, that is so effing cool. Then she goes back to like cooking or whatever. And so then, back in those days, they lived a nomadic lifestyle. So there were like these tents, and there were like goats, and there were like sheep. It was like Hidalgo, but not. So they lived in these tents and stuff, and so they wandered around a lot. And then one day there was a famine, and they were like, hey, let's go to Egypt. Ironically setting up a plot point in the future for when Joseph's brothers go to Egypt, as they are his great-great-great-great-grandson. So, oh, the irony. Anyway, so Abraham and his wife Sarai, whose name was changed to Sarah after Abraham's dong enlargement, she was like, they were like, let's go to Egypt to make sure everything's, you know, they can give us food. So they're going to Egypt, and they show up, and Pharaoh's like, whoa, who is that babe? And it was Sarah. And Pharaoh's like, I want her right here, right now, let's do this thing. And Abraham's like, we have food? And he's like, yeah. Will you, like, not kill me if you can bang her? Definitely. Okay. And so he gives his wife to Pharaoh, and he's like, yeah, she's my sister. My really, really hot sister who I've had sex with, but here's my sister. And so Pharaoh's like, oh my gosh, no way. So he takes Sarah back to his little concubine house. He puts her in there, and he's like, just, girl, just chillax, and I'll be back. And so she's in there or whatever. And she's there for a couple of days, and apparently Pharaoh needs like some time to like get his royal wiener ready for the penetration. And so he's spending a couple of days doing whatever, and suddenly there's like major shit going on. All of a sudden people are getting sick, and the crops are dying or whatever. And instead of thinking that like, oh hey, maybe the famine has finally reached us, no, Pharaoh's like, what was different? You. And so he finds Sarah, and he's like, it's all your fault. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he's like, no, seriously, And so he makes her stay there, and he runs and finds Abraham. He's like, you son of a bitch. And Abraham's like, oh God. And he grabs him, he pulls him over. He's like, what did you do? He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so he's all, but there's people in my place getting sick or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, right. Not because you're trying to bone my wife. He's like, your wife? He's like, yeah. Did I mention that? Should have mentioned that. Probably shouldn't have mentioned that. Yeah, that's my wife. You're trying to bone my wife. And he's like, so he goes, and he grabs Sarah, and he's like, take her and get the fuck out of here. And he gives them grain. Otherwise, Abraham's like, oh, we'll stay around. He, like, there'll be so much shit going down. He's like, go! And he gives a bunch of grain, and he sends them away. So Abraham's like, okay. So they're wandering through the desert or whatever, and Abraham decides that it's high time for him to follow through on that promise that God made. It's time to have kids. So he and Sarah start going at it, like, all the time, but nothing happens. And so, baffled, Abraham is like, what shall I do in order that I may help God fulfill his promise to me? Because obviously the master of the universe is completely incapable of fixing this problem himself. I'll help him out. And so he decides, hey, I think the best idea would be for my wife's really, really hot maid to sleep with me. And then my kids will kind of be her kids, and they'll be like Sarah's kids through extension. And the fact that the maid was really, really hot didn't hurt at all. And so Sarah's like, okay, she's sad that she can't have any kids. And so she's like, take Hagar, my slave, whose horrible name was made up for by her hotness. It says so in the Bible. And so he's like, go and do whatever you want with her. And so, like, hey, and he and Hagar are like, Nookie! And then they go at it in the tents. And Sarah's like sitting outside, like knitting or something, being pissed. And so, after one time, Hagar is pregnant. And Sarah's like, bitch, please. But, it was all her fault. She told her to do it, so Sarah had no place to be angry. So, Hagar's getting off that, and pregnant, and she's going around in the rooms being like, oh, wow, the baby was kicking so hard today. You know how that, oh, no, wait, you don't know how that is, because your womb is like a barren field. A field. And she's like, and so she shows up one day, and she's all, yeah, Abraham, you know, this has got to stop. He's like, no, I really think we're making progress here. Like, I definitely think this will definitely help God out. Sarah's like, really? He's like, yeah, totally. Sarah's like, fine. So, Hagar eventually ends up having a baby, and his name is Ishmael. And he's like a cute little kid, like wanders out or whatever. And then one day, when Ishmael's just like chilling, and Hagar's like watching him, and Sarah's sitting being all pissed, then two guys show up. Guys wearing cut-off shorts. So the plot thickens. So they show up at Abraham's house, and they're like, hey, Abraham, what's going on? Abraham's like, visitors! Because they're out in the middle of the desert. You know, it's really hard to get visitors. It's not like he's sitting next to the temple gate or something. So he's like, guys, come on, we'll have dinner or whatever. Sit down. I'm like, oh, no, we couldn't intrude. They're like, no. He's like, no, seriously, come on. So they sit down under a tree, and he's like, let's slaughter a calf. And so they go and they slaughter a calf, and they're like, oh my gosh, calf, you're so nice. He's like, yeah, I know. And he makes some calf food, and they make yogurt, and they make all sorts of cool stuff. The Bible tells you, very important. It's very important that they ate yogurt during this meeting. So they sit down, and they're knocking back their yogurt or whatever. And Sarah's in the tent because, I don't know, I guess you didn't want men in cut-off shorts to ogle your woman or something. So